Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the lecture on the phenomenological approach. So, what is phenomenology? Phenomenology is a school of it's a part of school of philosophy which is emerged as a part of development of social science during the 20th century. We can say that in the midst of the 20th century, but as a philosophical school, its emergence was in the end of 19th century. So, phenomenology means phenomenology is actually another name of um, what post-positivism. So, in the previous class, we studied about logical positivism. Logical positivism advocates for the study based on empirical evidence, observation, experiments, experiences, uh, which are considered as very scientific way of study. So, verification, study through the verification should be considered important. So that are the concern of the uh, logical positivist thinkers. But we can say that phenomenological approach is a better step forward than the logical positivist approach. That why phenomenological approach we can call it as post-positivist approach. When logical positivist approach is a part of behavioralist approach, phenomenological approach is a part of post-behavioralism. Okay, so phenomenology is essentially an analytical method or framework for describing and explaining social relationships and psychological orientations. Phenomenologists attempt to account for the subjective qualities which logical positivists and empiricists assume to be unreal or mistakenly treated as objective observable phenomena. When uh, while taking a subject, while taking a problem or a policy into study, uh, logical positivists consider the verifiable things in the study, in the study area. uh, the things which are to be observed, the things which are to be subjected to experiments or experiences are to be considered as verifiable things. So it is scientifically proven subjects, proven topic or area. So that is that kind of a approach, that kind of a perspective is the trademark of logical positivism, whereas phenomenological approach says that um, it's a deep intuition is the main uh, base of a study, more than that of a uh, quantitative analysis of a problem. Sometimes empiricist or the logical positivist uh, condemn some things as just unreal things or value oriented things. They actually logical positivism is a value free study, so they condemn all values as very subjective things, whereas um, uh, the things which are treated as objective observable phenomena, even they say that all things should be treated under objective observable phenomena, where phenomenological thinkers also consider all the sometimes the objective phenomena as also as the part of subjective things. So that is the difference between phenomenological approach and the logical positivist approach, or positivism versus post-positivism. Uh, it will be clear while we go to the detail of this uh, approach. So, phenomenological approach arose in the 20th century as a protest against earlier behavioralism. means logical positivist approach views. Phenomenologically oriented theorists argued that personality is not merely passively molded by internal motivational or external situational forces that shape what the person becomes. Instead, people are active agents in the world and have a measure of control over their environment and their own lives. In this view, people are considered capable of knowing themselves and being their own experts. Edmund Husserl was the founder of the school of phenomenology. He was a German philosopher, acknowledges that phenomenology began late in the 1890s, that means the end of the 19th century, and this research method is dominant in philosophy because Husserl thought that the world means a world experienced and made meaningful by acts of consciousness. So he believes that the consciousness has a great role in making the world today. So this phenomenological approach is emerged as a part of philosophy during the late 19th century, whereas after a long time, in the midst of the 20th century, we can see that phenomenological approach is entering into the social science as a part of post-behavioralist approach. So, logical positivism is a part of behavioralist approach, whereas phenomenological approach is a part of post-behavioralism, or otherwise we can call phenomenological approach as a post-positivist approach. So here, Leedy and Omroth argue that phenomenological study aims to understand people's perceptions of and perspectives on a particular occurrence and the meaning of they attach to the occurrence. So here he give an example. For example, a researcher in public administration may want to conduct research on rural women in Kerala to understand their perceptions of the empowerment of women and the various interventions they have witnessed. Uh, Actually, Leedy and Obrod had given an example of a rural woman in an African village, but here I give you an example to understand an example of Kerala. So, here a researcher in public administration may want to conduct research on rural women in Kerala to understand their perceptions of the empowerment of women and the various interventions they have witnessed. Okay, then these women can define their everyday experience as it relates to that phenomena. The researcher can observe and listen to the construction of the participant. In other instances, there is a possibility that the researcher has experienced that phenomena and now seeks to understand other people's perception of the same phenomena. I will make it clear. Mm, If a researcher is going to conduct research on rural women in Kerala, in logical positivist approach, he may consult or he will go to the field and make an observation on the field on everyday activities of women and how the political empowerment or how the empowerment is happening among the women. So he can observe as a researcher in the field. That kind of observation is very verifiable, so we can say it is a scientific method. That is the concern of the logical positivism or the positivist approach. Here, in the post-positivist approach or the phenomenological approach, say that um, it's a part of when researcher goes to the field and take a step forward and make a make a conversation, make a interaction with the respondents, and he will get more detailed and deep or more deeper uh, information from the field from the field. That is very very in very real data than the experimental method or experience method. So the researcher can observe and listen to the construction of the participant. Um, to understand this thing, I can also give you an example. You just take a case of uh, politi- um, political empowerment of a woman. So we that means you are a student. You are going to understand how or the right of uh, uh, women's uh, status or their empowerment in a political party by analyzing their uh, opportunity, how whether the women will get an opportunity to raise their voice in the meeting, how many of them are getting uh, a, an adequate space to raise their voice in a meeting. So take the case of a meeting which is going to be conducted in a conference hall. So you are a researcher. You are going to observe the phenomena or observe what is going to happen in the auditorium. So you are going to the auditorium and watching. So there are lots of women and men. So we can see that approximately women and men share in the meeting is equal. There is a 50% of women. We can see that members are 50% of members are women and others are men. So we can say that there is any equal representation is given to the there is a gender equality. We can feel that there is a gender equality. Then we are going to study whether the women are given uh, their space to raise their voice or their opinion in the meeting. So we are going to observe, and in the we find that in the meeting, 15 members, male members, uh, uh, raised their opinion in the meeting, and 17 female members, 17 women members raised their meeting. They raised their voice in the meeting. So, as a scientific school of thought, as in a perspective of empirical study or in a positive logical positivist way, we can say that women and or otherwise women have been given more chance than the men in the meeting to raise their voice, raise their uh, opinion. So we can come to a conclusion. So that kind of approach is given by logical positivism. But in the phenomenological approach, they say that the knowledge actually we are getting the knowledge from the intuition of a researcher, intuition, intuition from the respondents, intuition from the field. So how the intuition how we will get the intuition? So we can interact with the respondents while making interaction with the respondents, the researcher, that means you find that somebody in the meeting, in the women respondents who raised their voice in the meeting, the 70 members of the 17 committee, 17 who raised their meeting say that actually only 7 members are raised are given to express their view independently, whereas 10 members, 10 women members, 10 women members who are given space to their voice, actually they are the wives of the male members of that committee. Actually, they supported the views of the male members of that committee. The fact is that only 7 members raised their voice in accordance with the rights of women in that meeting. So, in the actual sense, what is the meaning of this experience? Actually, 15 male members raised their voice in accordance with the male opinions as a part of male voice, whereas only 7 women members they raised their voice as a part of uh, women's representation, whereas the 10 members are actually supporting the men members in the committee. So uh, how we get the exact knowledge from the field, from the interaction. So more than the observation, we also interacted with the respondents, and that kind of knowledge is more deeper and more stronger than the logical positivist one. That is the way, that is a concern given by this phenomenological approach. So it's based on the human consciousness, cognitive level of the human beings. So phenomenological approach consider the deeper aspects of human beings. When defining phenomenology in the context of public administration, McNabb acknowledges that it establishes meanings that social actors apply to events, works, and symbols. For example, a researcher in public administration may conduct research on the personal experiences of unemployed postgraduate students. The main goal is to understand their experiences and perceptions of the problem of unemployment. This means that the researcher allows the participants to share their perceptions and then record them or take notes in order to present their perception as they are. So this kind of the researcher is collecting data uh, as a recorded one, as in the form of voices from the respondents. So that is a very deeper information. That is a very reliable information we get from the field. So that kind of approach is taken by the phenomenologist in the study. So Embry here names 6 features that characterize the generic approach of phenomenology. So the 6 features are: first one, it opposes accepting unobservable matters. So positivist only considering observable matters, and sometimes they also consider the unobservable matters, like uh, for example, when in empiricism, we also take quantitative data, like um, the meeting records. We examine the meeting records, and in the records, in the minutes, we see that there is a woman raise their voice, more women raise their voice. So that is in the minute. So that is so that we also consider it as it is a evident, it is as an evidence of our study. So that is unobservable thing, that is part of research. But here they they oppose these unobservable matters, while uh, the acceptance of these unobservable matters in the study. And um, post-positivism or phenomenological approach opposes naturalism. Logical positivists say that as in the natural law, society is determined. That kind of an approach is not accepted by the phenomenological approach. And phenomenological approach justifies cognition and also evaluation and even action. It considers ideal objects such as numbers and propositions, but also universal essence to be observable or evident. Sometimes it also um, consider the numbers. Quantitative data are also considered uh, by the phenomenological approach, but also uh, the universal essence also to be considered as observable or evident thing. So uh, to understand that, I will give you an example. Uh, so in a society, we are going to study something in a society. As a post-positivist style of or way of approach, we also consider the every aspects of the society: caste, discrimination, religion, communalism. So these are not, we can we can these are not tangible items. We can't touch, we can't see in the field, but we can understand, we can realize it, we can uh, these are from our deepest knowledge. So that comes from the intuition of ourselves. But so these are all part of the universal essence. So we are considering that as a part of the study. That kind of that is the meaning of this feature. And phenomenologists practice a reflective observation of what can be called encountering of objecting and also objects as they are encountered. And every time they observe an interaction, and also taking data and collecting information from a kind of encountering process and from the objects. Some kind there is a reflective actions, reflective observation is going. The respondent is given a reply, and from the reply we also understand the actual situations of the person or the instance or the situation. So that kind of a process is also is being analyzed in the phenomenological approach. So in short, we can say that phenomenological approach is a post-positivist approach. Its key objective is analyze events by intuitive process. Due to the growing disenchantment with the utility of scientific methods, logical positives, and econometrics in the study of public policy, advocates of phenomenological approach argue that intuition is more important than logical positivist or scientific approaches. They proposed an approach which is phenomenological or non-positivist. So these are the shorts of what we studied in related to the phenomenology. So we can define the phenomenological approach as a disciplined employment of sound intuition, itself born of experience, not reducible to models, hypotheses, quantifications, hard data, and the like. Uh, Post-positivist analysts treat each piece of social phenomena as a unique event, with ethnographic and other qualitative indices becoming paramount. So, the phenomenological approach is an employment of, or which is which consider the intuition which is coming out of experience, and that kind of knowledge that we collect from the uh, observation and more techniques is not to be reduced to models or hypothesis or quantification. So here we get or we collect a qualitative data from the field. So public policy analysis, in the public policy analysis, post-positivist analyst treat each piece of social phenomena as a unique event with ethnographic and other qualitative indices. So here we can say that phenomenological approach is a qualitative approach, whereas positivist approach or empirical approach is a quantitative approach. Okay, here comes the major difference between logical positivist approach and the phenomenological approach. Here, logical positive approach is based on prediction, whereas phenomenological approach is based on understanding. It's a rigorous hypothesis testing where in the phenomenological approach, working hypothesis, it requires analyst detached observation where mutual interaction between inquirer and the object of the study. Sophisticated techniques of analysis means hard data, quantification, statistical techniques, etc., where observing evidence, continued use of case studies. and it's a value-free, fact-based, tangible knower and not are independent, whereas it is intuition and total immersion in relevant information. It is a cause and effect relationship, whereas in phenomenological approach, multiple realities, cause and effects cannot be distinguished as entities. Mutual simultaneous shaping is given much importance. So we can say that phenomenological approach is a qualitative technique, whereas logical positivism is a quantitative technique. So we can move every um, criteria in detail. Prediction and understanding. In logical positivism, prediction is the core thing, whereas there is understanding is given importance. So in both process, data analysis, their results are coming from the analysis, but uh, before starting the result, the researcher make an educated guess, that is hypothesis. um, because of A, the result B is happening. So the result of B is occurred because of the uh, cause of A. So in the research, the researcher going to analyze whether A is the uh, reason for the result of B. If it is true, the research is valid or the hypothesis is valid. If it is not true, say that B is not resulted because of A. That is a conclusion given in the logical positivist or empirical study. So here prediction is given much important. So here is the role of prediction is there. But in the phenomenological approach, a deep intuition is there, a deep understanding is there. So some um, uh, the researcher uh, tries to understand the um, phenomena of the study uh, through a deep intuition to the area of study by giving a deep intuition to the issue. So that is a main difference here. Prediction, there is understanding. So second one is a rigorous hypothesis testing. So ഇവിടെ in the means in the logical positivist approach നമുക്ക് കാണാൻ കഴിയുന്നത് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഒരു വിഷയത്തിലേക്ക് കടക്കുമ്പോൾ എ മൂലം ബി ഉണ്ടാകുന്നു എന്നുള്ളത് നേരത്തെ നമ്മൾ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ തന്നെ ബിക്കോസ് ഓഫ് എ result B is happening. So that kind of hypotheses are there. So we can make a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 hypotheses uh, or educated guess before starting the research, and in the throughout the research we are going to analyze is it right or wrong. So in whether A is the result of B or C, A is the cause of B or C is the cause of D is the process in the logical positivist approach. Whereas in the phenomenological approach, in the starting of the research, the researcher can think that maybe A is the cause of a B, but in the process, he will understand that not A, C is the cause of B because hypothesis is changing there. So there is a working hypothesis is there, but in logical positivism here only a testing of hypothesis happening in the logical positivist approach. So it will be clear in when you understand the uh, example of women participation. There is a hypothesis and we are testing, we are going to test the hypothesis where in the case of phenomenological approach, the researcher is going to test cause and effect. While testing the cause and effect, and the cause may shift into another. So running hypothesis or working hypothesis is there in the phenomenological approach. So in the logical positivist approach, analyst detached observation. So the researcher taking a observation far from the respondents. So in the logical positivism, researcher making an observation, and sometimes the respondents do not know about any kind of research is going on there. So it is not a participatory observation. Participatory observation is a part of phenomenological approach, but in the logical positivist approach, observation is there, but the the researcher make the observation as a detached one. So here is a detached observation is made by the researcher. Whereas in the phenomenological approach, mutual interaction between the inquirer and the object of the study. So there is a mutual interaction is there. So he gets the data, a deeper data from the respondents through the interaction. So we can say that it's a participatory observation, a kind of participatory observation. For analyzing data in the logical positivist approach, very sophisticated techniques are there, collecting tremendous data and making code and making statistical tools for analyzing this. Take the case of survey, election studies, etc. We are taking much quantity of data from the field and making sophisticated techniques for the analysis. Whereas in the phenomenological approach, observing evidence and continued use of case studies is there. In logical positivist approach, it is value-free, fact-based and tangible, knower and knower, only known and knower. Means the respondent and the researcher, the data which is coming from the respondent and the researcher itself. So here knower means the researcher and the known means the data. So researcher and the data, their relationship, the researcher determined this or he interpret the data. Whereas in the phenomenological approach, intuition or the deeper involvement in relevant information. So the researcher deeply involved in the research process and he get a very deeper knowledge or very intuitive knowledge in the phenomenological process. In the logical positivist approach, cause and effect relationship is there. Here the researcher is going to test whether the cause A is the cause for the result of B, or C is the cause for the result of D is the main process in the logical positivist approach. Whereas in the phenomenological approach, there arise multiple realities. Cause and effects cannot be distinguished as last or final points. So sometimes effect may shift as cause and cause may shift as effect. So simultaneous shaping will be a matter in the phenomenological approach. So these are the phenomenological approach, and finally we are moving to the major criticism against the post-positivist approach. First one, it is a lack of vigor. It's not a strengthful or a strong approach. Something say that because of the ways of much importance given to the social phenomena or the knowledge of person or the intuition of the person, that kind of intangible sources are there. So something is criticized as a lack of vigor, and something else say that it is away from scientific approach as advocated by the behavioralist, and something else say that it going backward to the traditional approach like descriptive or non-scientific approaches. So these are the main criticism against the phenomenological approaches. There may be lots of criticisms are there. You can also make detailed notes on the phenomenological approach, and make a list on more criticism against phenomenological approach and more points regarding phenomenological approach and the difference between phenomenological approach and the logical means positivist approach. Okay, these are the references given to the study, so please go through it. Okay, thank you.